Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We are in poem 308, I Send Two Sunsets. And here sunsets will represent two poems about sunsets. Now, in many ways, we have already seen in our study of the poetry of Emily Dickinson to this point that Emily is almost always in competition or conquest. This is the Promethean Emily, we might say, constantly trying to struggle against nature or against God, and at the same time cooperating with nature and possibly even God. We are in this poem back to poem 228, as well as poem 307, another sunset poem. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm also hopeful that you've worked through our preceding 307 poems. As we said, we just finished with 307, the one who could repeat the summer day. Now, again, we're back to the question of the artist trying to somehow capture nature or something about nature. In this case, again, it's sunsets. And the real question about the poet-artist is the poet-artist in contest or in cooperation with nature? Let's enjoy the poem. I send two sunsets, day and I, in competition ran. I finished two and several stars while he was making one. His own was ampler, but as I was saying to a friend, mine is the more convenient to carry in the hand. Now, I love this little poem. It's got a humorous voice to it, but there's a certain edginess to this poem as well that we don't want to overlook. By the way, here by send, we can either mean actual sending or we can mean creating. And again, there's two sunsets, or we're in competition. Of course, nature produces the sunset. The poet-artist tries to capture the sunset. Which one is the stronger of the two? Notice she'll begin with, I send two sunsets, day and I in competition ran. Notice the two C words here, competition and convenient. Competition ran. In other words, there's a certain kind of, again, Promethean voice here that says, day was making its day and its sunset, and in that amount of time, I finished two poems and several stars while he was making the one. Now, there's been these moments in her poems already, we're going to see more of this, where she talks about the poetic process and the challenges of the poetic process. It is an amazing thing to think that between 62, 63, somewhere in that area, she is going to have her greatest output of poetics, and sometimes writing more than even a single poem a day, which is just mind-blowing, given the degree of depth, of difficulty of these poems. And then in the second stanza, she's going to draw conclusions about either a poem about sunset or actual sunset. His nature, if you will, notice it is masculine. His own sunset or day was ampler. In other words, I'm not going to argue, she says, that my poetic attempt somehow captures the genuineness of the actual natural day and sunset. But, notice again the competition. As I was saying to a friend, this kind of informal, and is she talking Sue possibly here, or Sam Boyles, we're not sure. As I was saying to a friend, mine, that is my production, my sunset, my poem about sunset, is the more convenient to carry in the hand. In other words, yeah, you only get to see the sunset one time, but a great poem about it, or a great poem about anything related to nature, is something that one can have in the hand. And what is it that, Blake said about to see the world in a grain of sand? And I think there's some of that going on here. In other words, there's a power of poetics, Emily's going to argue, that transcends anything that even nature can produce itself. And I think that's the point at 2A. The great artists, they both at the same time can compete and cooperate with nature. And I think this is what makes Emily such genius. At 2B, I love the key words of competition and convenient as they come together. There will be two poems at 3A that I'm going to recommend later that we come back to when we study this. The first is poem 569. It runs like this. I reckon when I count at all, first poets, then the sun, then summer, then the heaven of God, and then the list is done. But looking back, the first so seems to comprehend the whole, the others look a needless show. So I write poets all. Their summer lasts a solid year. They can afford a sun the east would deem extravagant. And if the further heaven be beautiful as they prepare for those who worship them. It is too difficult a grace to justify the dream. And then when we hit poem 448, she'll play it this way. This is a famous poem. This was a poet. It is that distills amazing sense from ordinary meanings and utter so immense. From the familiar species that perished by the door, we wonder it was not ourselves arrested it before. Of pictures, the disclosure. You see that line as a poet. Of pictures, the disclosure. The poet, it is he. Entitles us by contrast to ceaseless poverty. Of portion so unconscious the robbing could not harm. Himself, to him, a fortune, exterior to time. Both of these poems will read rather nicely with this idea of the Promethean Emily, the competitor Emily. Finally, at 3b, what was a time, think about this, what was a time when you were both in competition and in cooperation with nature? And if you're an athlete, you know exactly what we're talking about, don't you? Because, of course, to run all that distance is both competition and cooperation. Thank you.